Hello guys and gals, and this is the start of a new series. I decided to go from Alfred Hitchcock into the Twilight Zone, basically just to keep the horror vibe going. And we have the whimsical with The Princess Bride, interspersed every other day, at least until it expires. And then we'll probably be reading Escape Room by Marin Sofels, or Sofel. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, but anyways. So let's get started. Let's get started with the copyright information. I was careful and checked the copyright information here to make sure it's okay to read, and I don't see where it says you can't. So anyways, it says right here. Oh, I need to take a picture of this, of course. Sorry. Let's see here. There. I forgot to do that. So anyways, it should be on the screen momentarily. It says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone, copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company, Incorporated, a Random House company, and then it gives the address there. We don't need to actually read that aloud. The book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited. Printed and bound in the United States of America, Library of Congress, that's all that information, and so yeah. Anyways, we're going to read the foreword first. This one doesn't have any acknowledgments or anything, so we are... Oh, I will say that this was adapted by Walter B. Gibson, and I will be giving them full credit in the description. Anyways, so let's go on to the foreword. Here is a parade of strange, uncanny stories, all original in treatment, to give them authenticity. They have been based in varying degrees upon well-recorded incidents or experiences in which many persons have sincerely or implicitly believed, particularly those who participate in weird events. As a result, these tales combine the elements of actuality and fantasy, putting them into that bourne where they so rightfully belong, the Twilight Zone. Must be going to that metal freak show. That's a weird event. A few classic cases have been told with stress on their original details, but with due effort to capture the moods of the individuals involved and to add dramatic quality needed for their full appreciation. Mere narrative is often insufficient to portray the emotional reactions of those who are confronted by the unknown or who find themselves boxed in that borderland of existence where it becomes impossible to distinguish the real from the unreal. Only by living those experiences with them, as you most certainly will in these pages, can it become possible to recognize what they really underwent. Other traditions of Ghostland have been developed in these stories with special emphasis on modern settings where they could very well occur. Incidents of similar nature have been incorporated to give them stronger impact, and every story has been carried to a plausible culmination, which is a far cry from the legendary tales that often disintegrated more rapidly and thoroughly than the evanescent phantoms who formed their principal characters. In short, the recognized factors found in cases of the uncanny have been treated as they could, or even might, occur in everyday life, assuming that ghostly conditions do exist. There is a singular fascination in these stories of the grotesque and unexplainable that combine the true with the incredible. The interest began in ancient times, as witness a famous story by the Roman author Pliny that involved the ghost of an old man, complete with clanking chains. It became a dominant factor in the life of the Middle Ages, when warlocks and witches presumably roamed at will. It has reached a new peak through the efforts of modern psychic investigators to gain new insight on such subjects. All indications are that this field will expand in times to come. This may seem surprising in that it forms a link between the supernatural and the past. This may seem surprising that it forms a link between the superstition of the past and the scientific progress of the future. But that is our modern learning. Other than a series of forays into the unknown, which grows to vaster and unbelievable proportions, the farther we advance into that uncharted realm. The ancient alchemists talked of transmuting lead to gold, only to be ridiculed by the chemists of a later day. Yet, those first students of natural philosophy, as science was then called, would have decided any prophet who might have correctly predicted the wonders of nuclear physics that lay only a few hundred years ahead. As for ghosts, there are skeptics 100 years ago who laughed at stories of haunted rooms in the castles and manor houses of a century before. But if those same scoffers could have been projected to the present, they would have had their wits scared out of them if they had walked into a modern living room and seen a television set in full operation. There is, of course, the question, where can we find solid ground for all this ghost stuff? The answer already indicated is in the authenticity of the original accounts themselves. It does not matter whether a reported occurrence was magnified or distorted. That goes on in our newspapers every day, yet we still accept the things we read as facts. Day after day, people who swear in courtrooms that they will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, quote unquote, come up with statements so conflicting that only one can be right, while the other must be wrong, yet each person's testimony, if honestly given, is to some degree acceptable in the eyes of the law. So it goes with psychic phenomena. All we need to know is whether a person who saw a ghost or heard ghostly sounds was sincere in his report. Then we know that, right or wrong, it was a phase of human experience. What it proves or disproves is not the immediate point. Something happened. That at least is established. Other persons believed or disbelieved what they heard, and out of that came some final conclusion, whether true or false. Still, something happened, like the time an apple dropped from a tree and hit Sir Isaac Newton on the head. After wondering why the apple fell down instead of up, Sir Isaac propounded the law of gravitation. If instead he had laid down a line of fine logic proving that neither he, the apple, nor the tree had ever existed, historians still would agree on one thing. Somebody was hit on the head by something. So it is with persons who claim they have seen ghosts. Somebody was hit by something, not on the head, but in the head. Such is the impact of a full-fledged ghostly experience, the sort of shocker, quote-unquote, that turns a doubter into a believer. While such adventures may not be too happy in real or unreal life, one thing is certain. It is fun to read about them, as you will find out when you delve into the pages that follow. And we are ready to start. Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. And we are ready for The Ghost of Ticonderoga. Donald Campbell, Laird of Inveroway, halted his horse on the steep hillside as he studied the scene below. At the bottom of the rugged roadway lay the green slope of a glen, where a silvery stream cascaded from thick woods to join the muddy river that wound its way through the well-tilled valley. Beyond the glen rose another hillside, like the one on which Inveroway paused. It was studded with huge, odd-shaped stones and patched with clumps of purple heather. Through the gap above the glen, Inveroway could see mountains rising like gigantic steps to the twin peaks of Ben Cruachan, which towered like mighty sentinels against the cloudy sky. Off in the distance, the struggling afternoon sunlight caught the blue glint of a deep-set loch, a narrow lake of the Scottish Highlands. All that was beyond, Inveruay's domain. He was master only of this winding valley, with its glen and skirting hillsides, and at that, his rights were scarcely more than a landowner's, but his heart lay far beyond, off amid those misty, ever-beckoning highlands, where past and future blended in a timeless present, and the wild freedom of Scotland ever seemed to dwell. How often Inveruay would view the scene again with a question, for this was the summer of 1755. The war with France threatened the United Kingdom of England and Scotland. Already reports of wilderness fighting in the outpost of America were causing war clouds to thicken over Europe. And Inveruay, as an officer of the Royal Highlanders, just so he doesn't lose his head. Isn't that the only way you can kill a Highlander? As an officer of the Royal Highlanders, probably would be called for active duty. So it was with a pang of regret that he wrenched his gaze from the distant mountains, whose clouds seemed somehow ominous, and seemed to ride down to the glen. Then, as he raised his eyes to a parting glance, he caught sight of movement much closer by. A ragged, furtive figure was dodging down the hillside, stopping at one rock, then another, as though to hide himself from something above, for he was continually looking back up toward the ridge. As Inveruay reined in his horse to watch, the man continued his frantic tactics, never realizing that he was being observed from below until he was almost at the road. Then the fugitive stopped in sheer fright at the sight of the horseman blocking the path. He seemed about to dive for futile shelter in the heather. Then desperation evidently gave him sudden decision. Stumbling forward, he raised his quivering hand in frantic appeal. "Help me," the man gasped. "Save me before they overtake me. My life is at stake." "Who are you?" Inveruay parried. "An escaped prisoner or an outlaw?" "Neither. It all grew from an argument in a tavern. There was a brawl, and I killed a man. But it was in fair fray, I swear it. On my honor as a McNiven." "A fair fight, you say?" rejoined Inveruay. "Then why not give yourself up to the law?" "Because blood avengers are on my track," McNiven insisted hoarsely. "They would kill me on sight. That I know. That I do not doubt." Nor did Inveruay doubt it. He could tell that McNiven had been in a fight. The fellow's face was bruised, and his clothes were bloodstained from wounds more severe than scratches from the brambles that had torn them. Tavern brawls were frequent in the surrounding villages, and the participants became vengeful if any of their friends were hurt. For nearly 10 years, all Scotland had been seething with hotheads and malcontents, following the final effort of Charles Edward, the Stuart pretender, to regain the British throne that then occupied by George II. Inveruay himself had been engaged in that struggle, but on the side of King George. He had fought at Culloden against some of the Highland clans whose names he respected, and afterward he had secretly sheltered and protected some of those very rebels, rather than have them fall prey to the vengeful English. So, for the moment, McNiven's pleas were reaching sympathetic ears. "You must save me," McNiven pleaded. "I'm giving myself up to you. You can't let them kill me like a dog." Inveruay weighed the plea, then agreed. I can hide you for a few days, long enough to make sure that you will be given a fair trial. But there can be no fair trial hereabouts. In that case, I shall send you safely on your way." You will swear to that? Aye, on the word of an Inveroway, which never yet has been known to fail friend or foe. Inveroway's promise braced McNiven, who realized that he had met the laird of this locality. Inveroway, close to middle age and a man of commanding appearance, was the sort whose word would stand. But now McNiven's fearful glances up the hillside told him he expected pursuers to appear upon the brow at any moment. Again he pleaded, "You must hide me quickly, Inveroway, but where?" Down in yon glen, returned Inveroway. "Hurry there, while I watch for pursuers, and divert them if need be. But they will scour the glen and find me there. No, not where I intend to hide you. Get down there and wait." McNiven bounded full speed down the road, and Inveroway waited until he had almost reached the glen. Then, since no pursuers had appeared, the laird rode down and joined the fugitive. Inveroway tethered his horse and guided McNiven on foot foot up the slope beside the tumbling stream. A great hush lay beneath the overhanging fir boughs, which cut off the sunlight and produced a weird gloom that added to McNiven's terror. But Inveroway was too preoccupied to notice it. Near a high rock, he indicated a tiny rivulet that came down a steep embankment and ordered, "Follow me up beside this burn and stay close." Check something real quick. Okay, so plenty of time. McNiven clambered close behind the guide, and it was well he did, for above the bank, Inveroway turned sharply and was swallowed by a thicket. From above the bank, Inveroway turned sharply and was swallowed by a thicket of evergreens. McNiven pressed through and found Inveroway waiting beside a low overhanging ledge. Under there," the laird said, "you will find a safe hiding place. By dusk I shall be back with food for you. So in you go." McNiven stooped to look beneath the ledge. "Why, it's no larger than a foxhole," he exclaimed. "How can a body hide in there?" "Two bodies did," replied Inveroway. "One was William Wallace, and the other was Robert Bruce. That was 400 years ago, and the secret of this hiding place has been handed down from one laird of Inveroway to the next ever since. So until now, I alone knew of its existence. But if others should find it, they would turn this foxhole into a fox trap," protested McNiven. "I am no Wallace nor Bruce." "That I know," imposed Inveroway, a ring of sarcasm in his tone. "They were brave Scots. Perhaps there are no longer any like them, but my ancestors gave refuge to those who needed it, and they, in their turn, kept the secret. I offer you safety on those same terms." As McNiven still hesitated, Inveroway stooped beneath the ledge and slid feet first into a narrow hole that slanted down between the rocks. He was swallowed bodily from view until his voice came hollowly from the depths. "Follow me down here." Encouraged, McNiven followed and found Inveroway in a high-roofed cave that arched beneath the steep slope of the glen. From there, Inveroway led McNiven to an inner cavern where a pool of clear water trickled down into the rocks. "All the spring water you need," the laird told the fugitive. "I shall bring food later, and as I promised." Inveroway squeezed his stocky bulk up out through the foxhole and started down the path. As he looked back, he saw McNiven's wan, nervous face peering from beneath the ledge, but he darted quickly from sight as both men heard distant shouts and the muffled barking of dogs, indicating that pursuers were approaching the glen. They had gone by, however, when Inveroway reached his horse, which was patiently waiting for him. So he mounted and rode on around the next hill to his mansion, which stood surrounded by outlying farm buildings. There, Inveroway found a villager named Drummond awaiting him. Twitching his cap between his hands, Drummond announced, We're tracking down a murderer, Laird. So while the rest went on ahead, I waited. I waited here to tell you. Your cousin, Ian Campbell. Well, Laird, you see, it was like this. And Verway smiled knowingly. His cousin, Ian, was several years younger than he, but the two were as close as brothers. Ian, bold, dashing, quick to accept any challenge, was just the sort who would be leading the hunt for a murderer. And Verway could understand why the villagers were so close on McNiven's trail if Ian had roused them. You mean you have a message for me from my cousin Ian? Aye, in a way, yet not exactly so. Drummond halted, twisting his cap worldly. My message is about your cousin. It was Ian who was murdered, and in cold blood, sir. Since the slayer headed this way, we thought you should be on the watch for him. Drummond broke off. The color had left in Verway's face, and his body swayed as from a sudden shock. Drummond, knowing nothing of Verway's meeting with McNiven, attributed the laird's stunned silence solely to the news of Ian's death. Excusing himself, the villager hastened off to rejoin the search party, leaving Verway alone outside his front door. Long minutes passed, then Verway, like a man in a trance, entered the house and made his way numbly to the kitchen. The servants, like the members of the family, who had already heard the news, discreetly stayed away, feeling that the laird would want to be alone with his grief. So Verway did. But he had a duty first. In the kitchen, he cut slabs of cold mutton and thick slices of cheese, which he wrapped with fat round buns called scones. That done, Verway stabled his horse, and taking his lantern along with the bundle of food, walked back through the gathering dusk to the already darkened glen. There he lighted the lamp and made his way to the cave, where he called to McNiven. The fugitive recognized the laird's voice and came to the mouth of the cave to receive the bundle of food. The darkness of the cave was not sitting well with McNiven, whose voice came in almost a whimper. You can't leave me alone here. It's fearful. As it should be, Verway replied coldly, for a man with blood on his hands. I promise you shelter, nothing more. But how will I know when the way is clear? Tomorrow I shall bring more food and tell you if the search has ended. Then you would do well to go your way before I regret my promise. Grimly, Verway made his way from the glen, extinguished the lantern as he emerged into the moonlight. From behind him, the whisper of the wind swept furs. The ripple of the burn sounded like strange, taunting voices. On the way back to the mansion, he had a feeling that he was being followed, and at intervals he swung quick about, wondering if McNiven, the murderer, had become suspicious and bold enough to stalk him from the cave. But only the weaving trees and hulking contours of the hills, eerie shapes in themselves, were visible in the moonlight. Soon the white walls of the farm buildings loomed like welcoming specters. Then the stone mansion itself, with darkened windows, and Verway entered and went straight to his own room. There, propped in bed, he tried to sleep, but the events of the afternoon disturbed him. The meeting with McNiven, the oath that Verway had so unwittingly taken, the fact that his own cousin Ian was the slayer's victim, all carried a touch of fate that stirred his Highland imagination. Half aloud, Verway muttered, I wonder if the like of that had happened before. I wonder if the like of this has happened before. Then, to put the question to rest, he lighted a pair of candles on the table beside him, and chose a book from the shelf above. The volume contained the prophecies of Coinich Adhar, a famous Highland seer of the century before, many of whose predictions had been fulfilled during the years between. As Verway delved through the musty pages, an odd thing first annoyed him, then puzzled him. It was the repeated waving of the candle flame. It couldn't be due to the draft from the hallway, for the door was tightly shut. The window was open, but not a breath of air was stirring outside. as Inveraway could tell from the tree leaves, which were all motionless as if frozen by the silvery moonlight. Yet the flickering continued, and with it Inveraway felt a weird, chilling sensation that caught the tempo of his heartbeats. Then, as he tried to shake off the feeling and return to his book, a shadow slowly stretched across the page. Inveraway looked up, and the icy throbs faded as his heart warmed with sudden joy. Beside the bed stood his cousin Ian Campbell, studying him with a fixed, solemn gaze. Ian, here, and still alive? Welcoming words sprang from Inveraway's lips, only to fade as quickly as the flickery light. Ian's face was as waxen as the candles themselves, except for streaks of blood that came from his clotted blonde hair, down his cheeks and chin to the open neck and his torn jacket. There, Inveraway saw great knife gashes across Ian's throat and chest. Any one of them would have been sufficient to have caused his death, for his jacket, too, was all gory. Ian's lips barely moved as he spoke in a hollow tone. Shield not the murderer, Inveraway. Blood must be shed for blood. We are going to stop that here. Let me find my bookmark real quick. I know I had it here a second ago. Oh, let me see. We're on page 4. Okay. Anyways, we have been reading from the Twilight Zone. I don't know what I do with my bookmark. Oh, here it is. We have been reading from the Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural. And if you like this content, also this is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. We want to make sure and give him credit too. Anyways, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.